Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming out to be with us this evening to the 4th wet season seminar that we've held up here in the top end. We certainly thank you so much for making the effort to come out and join with us this evening. The acknowledgement of country, we're here on Larrakia land, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land, the sea, and the community that we are within today, and we certainly do pay our respects to them, their cultures, and to their elders past and present. It's now my pleasure to introduce the board chair of CASA, Air Chief Marshal Retired Mark Binskin AC. I'm going to hand over to Mark, who will actually do a formal welcome to everyone here and get tonight underway.
Thanks, Tim, and welcome to everyone. It's a privilege. You've heard who I am. I have the privilege of being the chair of CASA. This is the major seminar that we give annually, and it's for a good reason. The territory, stunning when you fly around out there, but as you all know, day in day out, there's hazards there that are quite unique up in the territory that you need to acknowledge when you're planning and flying around day in day out. In the wet season, the risk there increases exponentially. It is still beautiful, stunningly beautiful like that, but there are things there that can bite you and bite you very, very quickly. And so seminars like this, it's important for us to be able to get out and talk to you about these sorts of things and understand the risks and factor that into your thinking as you look ahead in your careers flying around up here, whether you're in a 210, you're in a Conquest, or you end up in Embraers or whatever. So with that, Tim, thank you very much.
Good on you. Thanks, Mark.
Over Blue League.
So, in overview, why are we here? We are here ultimately to prevent aircraft accidents and ultimately as well to save lives. Northern Australia, of course, is home to a lot of inexperienced pilots, many of whom undertake their training down in the southern states, yet when they get up here and embark on their first wet season, they haven't really perhaps been really up close to thunderstorms and the types of hazards that are prevalent across the top end. And the wet season, of course, has its own unique hazards. And each of those, potentially, it actually does have the potential to kill you. What we're also going to do tonight is to highlight the considerable resources that are available from all of our partner agencies and CASA as well that will help you manage risk. Will help you manage risk and make good operational decisions and increase your margins of safety. What we want you to take away tonight, 3 main things: a greater understanding of the hazards of wet season flying, and there are lots of hazards up here. There are physical hazards, there are environmental hazards, and there's also organisational hazards as well. We can get tired, there's heat, there's humidity. People often suffer from dehydration, we get short-tempered, especially during the build-up time. Environmental hazards, low cloud, poor visibility, thunderstorms, turbulence. But also organisational hazards if you're operating as part of an organisation. We need to pay particular attention to our fuel planning, our flight planning. Okay? Things like aircraft performance, pressure to depart, pressure to continue a flight. Maybe some of that pressure not wanting to perhaps let the boss down. Okay? So we need to also understand that, or get an appreciation that safe and successful wet season is, of course, it's still possible, but it does require of aviators and organisations a more disciplined and strategic approach to managing risk and a renewed knowledge. You're not on your own. There's a lot of resources out there that can assist. So that's what we want you to take away. And what we actually ask of you, first of all, please approach tonight with an open mind. Nobody knows it all. We are all here to learn. Everyone here can learn something new. And be humble. Nobody knows it all. There is nothing wrong with aiming for excellence. Don't be one of those pilots that just accepts 51%. We need to build in those margins and have a thirst for building our knowledge in depth. As Mark alluded to earlier, a willingness to share your experiences, ask questions, talk to people, find information, and spread the word. So when you leave here, perhaps a renewed commitment to using all the resources that we have at our disposal to increase your margin of safety. Just obeying the rules and regulations, that's all fine and beaut, but really rules and regulations are essentially a blunt instrument. What we want to do is build margin, which is there to soak up things like human error and other human factors that we all have to deal with because we are imperfect people. And finally, be prepared to ask yourself, what can I do once I leave here tonight to improve the way I manage risk and to make better operational decisions? So tonight there's going to be, just immediately following me, a discussion of a recent fatal accident. And we use case studies a lot in a lot of CASA education. But all the ICAO Annex 13 protocols are followed. We're not here to judge. We're not here to ridicule. We're not here to point fingers. We are solely here to try and find out what were some of these causal factors and ask ourselves, can I apply that to my own flying or when I next climb in an aircraft, whether individually or as an organisation? Simon from ATSB, your first cab off the rank. So thanks, Simon. If you can come up and join me. Simon Grummett is an accident investigator with the Australian Transport Safety Bureau. Simon holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree from Monash Uni. Simon started his career as a materials engineer working with Defence in support of military aircraft such as the C-130, the F-18, F-111 and the Hawk trainer. Simon has a lot of experience in things like structural failure analysis and forensic engineering with Defence and has been with ATSB now for about 18 years. It is a challenging career which has seen him travel extensively throughout Australia and around the world. But Simon did tell me that one of the most rewarding challenges of a role such as him that he has is the capacity to build trust and to build confidence with those people directly involved when tragic circumstances arise, because we're not talking here about bland statistics. These are real people. Simon was the investigator in charge of the in-flight breakup involving a Cessna 210 that occurred on Christmas Eve 2022. And Simon, we are fortunate enough to have him with us. He will be taking us through what was learned during that investigation, and I'd like you to all join me in welcoming Simon.
Tonight I'm going to talk to you about a tragic accident which occurred in 2022, double fatality involving in-flight breakup of a Cessna 210. As Tim said, I've been with the ATSB now for 18 odd years. I've seen a fair bit in my time, and through investigation, it's put me into a position to lead this investigation into the 210 breakup. I do hold a degree in materials engineering and have got some experience with Defence. I'm a senior transport safety investigator, hold a diploma in transport safety investigation. I should say I'm not a pilot, so I'm a rarity in amongst all you lot. This investigation, it wasn't just one person. It involved numerous people. We had fixed wing pilots. We had a PhD in meteorology. This one is a lot about meteorology. We had 2 licensed aircraft maintenance engineers and a review by the ATSB Commission. Within the ATSB Commission, which is led by our Chief Commissioner Angus, we also have Peter Wilson, who is the ex-Qantas Chief Pilot. Thanks, Angus. Yeah. Throughout the investigation, we sought evidence from the Bureau of Met, CASA, the aircraft manufacturer, the Northern Territory Police, the coroner, the operator, their colleagues, and next of kin. Before we get started into this particular accident, Reese was the pilot. He was a young dude, just 22 years of age. So I look out into the room and I see there's some young faces out here. He'd headed to the Territory to get experience in the top end, to gain hours, find some adventure, visit local communities, and experience life living away from his family. He had strong connections to his family, brothers and sisters back in Queensland. His dad had worked in the mines and was proud that his son was moving away because he'd also moved away, find some adventure in life. We know that our young pilot had a desire to fly F-35s for the RAF or become a commercial airline pilot, like probably some of you guys in this room and girls in this room. He'd been applying for both streams and been accepted for an application, an interview when the accident occurred. His aviation career was just starting to kick off with many opportunities in front of him, and sadly it ended. The passenger was a young lady from the Yolngu country. We know that they booked the flight and was seeking assistance over the Christmas period, 2022, 2023, from a respite centre in Katherine. We know that they travelled previously with this particular operator and was really looking forward to spending time away from home in this unique environment in Katherine. This was the third time the operator had attempted to transport the passenger. The previous 2 flights have been cancelled due to weather. We're going to talk about the accident, sequence of events, the accident site, a little bit about that, nothing too gory, the technical examination, aircraft pilot and information, and the MET, and the findings and safety messages. Just a little bit about the ATSB as well. We investigate rail, marine and aviation accidents. We improve transport safety for the greatest benefit through our independent investigations. We're independent from the police, we're independent from CASA, and what we try and do is identify safety issues to then influence safety action to try and prevent tragedies like this from happening again. We're no blame, and we operate, we do what we do through what they call the Transport Safety Investigation Act. 24th of December 2022, our young pilot Reese from Katherine Aviation was assigned to operate a Cessna 210 aircraft. It was flying from Gove Airport to Katherine under VFR. At about 7:30 that morning, Katherine operations staff member called Reese just to let him know that there could be a potential delay in getting the passenger for the scheduled 0800 departure. During that conversation, the pilot was reported to have stated that the weather was a bit iffy. The aircraft was refueled to trim. It was fueled, so it had plenty of fuel on board. And as it turns out, the passenger arrived at about 0800 and boarded the aircraft with the pilot. The pilot's radio transmissions were recorded on the Gove CTAF. The transmissions indicated that about 8:12, the aircraft was taxied, engine run-up checks completed, and the takeoff roll commenced shortly after it, 08:14. A witness observed the aircraft depart with no issues. A final transmission was recorded on the CTAF, in which the aircraft was passing through 1,700 feet on climb to 8,500. They were tracking direct to Katherine, and no further radio communications were heard from that pilot. At 8:41, the Katherine Aviation operations person received a text message just providing the ETA, and it was going to be at 10:24 at Katherine Tyndall Airport. So everything was going fine. At 10:58, when the aircraft had not arrived as scheduled, the staff member called the pilot's mobile phone without answer and then sent a follow-up text message. Hey, just checking in. When no response was received, the company then commenced emergency operations. They started ringing around. They called back at Gove to see whether the pilot had turned back. That hadn't happened. There was no aircraft there. They rang around the local station properties, no aircraft there. At about midday, they contacted 000 and said, we've got a missing aircraft. The next day, around lunchtime, search aircraft identified wreckage in the East Arnhem Wilderness region. It was about midway between Gove and Katherine. The nearest aerodrome was Bullman, approximately 18 kilometres south. The right wing was located 300 metres from the main wreckage, and that is a good indicator. That indicates that aircraft sustained an in-flight breakup. Almost complete fragmentation of the aircraft structure had occurred on the ground impact. The propeller, engine, left wing, carry-through structure and empennage were all identified along the wreckage trail. There was no recorded data. When we start an investigation, when we attend an accident site, we're always looking for recorded data to try and figure out the sequence of events. There was no tracker fitted to this particular aircraft, no GPS or anything like that. So we went through and found telecommunication tower pings, if you will, from the pilot and passengers' mobile phones. Pretty much signifies the track of the aircraft as it progressed towards Katherine. Phone bounced in and out of those phone towers. At 10:01, the passenger's phone signal ceased its connection with the Bullman Tower. Because of the extent of damage to the passenger's phone, we expect that that would be the time of the accident. In the region of East Arnhem, the Tyndall radar did not and cannot detect aircraft in this area. So we didn't have any radar data as well. All we know is that the aircraft was intended to be tracking direct to Katherine at about 8,500 feet and 146 knots. So aside from the timing of the text messages and connections to mobile phone towers, there was no records of data from the accident flight. There was no recorded track of the aircraft on Oz runways, which many of you probably use. The iPad and phones were too damaged for data recovery to be completed. There are no roads out there. We attended the accident site on the 29th of December, so 5 days after the accident. It was pretty challenging to get into that country. It was by chopper. The police had to cut a landing pad, and I'm not a helicopter guy, and I was pretty scared going in there, I can tell you, because the tree canopy was over top. Storms were still prevalent in the area, which also delayed our arrival. And we also had remote area considerations to take into account. And what you can see here is we've got the orange arrow depicting the direction of wreckage spread, the initial ground impact point. Interestingly, the wreckage spread is in the opposite direction to Katherine. So from that, we suspect he might have turned back. Characteristically, this wing separation, once we got on the ground, shows characteristic, it's a right wing failure. It has severe upward bending present, permanent bending, rippling of the skin. All the fracture surfaces displayed, I guess, characteristic overstress features. There was no evidence of any sort of pre-existing defect or damage or repair or anything like that that might have weakened this, caused it to come off in flight. The fracture occurred through the main spar. Once the main spar is compromised in the Cessna 210 wing, then the wing comes off. I do have something here. So this section here was recovered from the accident site. Excuse me. And afterwards, you're more than welcome to come up and have a look. But this was recovered for our own laboratory examination, just to confirm that there was nothing wrong with this particular wing structure. We've got rapid tearing all the way through the straps, all through here, impregnation of wood fibers and sap from the impact. So if anyone's sort of wondering like what kind of loads this thing was experiencing in flight, they were absolutely tremendous. The red line just depicts the fracture path through the spar. So we believe that it's popped the rivets here, and it is torn through here and then upwards. The wing had no load carrying capacity after that point. A little bit about the aircraft. Interestingly, this particular aircraft had accumulated 15,000 hours. It was 5 hours away from its next 100 hourly. The operator had arranged with the pilot to transfer TFT from Gove into Katherine. And so there was an expectation, and there was a fully fueled aircraft waiting young Reese. So they were going to swap. So perhaps the operator's expectation put a little bit of pressure on Reese. I'm not saying that it existed, but in their mind, okay, the boss wants this thing back. I'm going to get this thing back. But we don't really know, but it could be one of the factors which led to some imposed pressure. A little bit about the pilot. He was new to the piloting game. 2021, he'd commenced their PPL. 6 months later, he'd obtained his CPL. He only had 24 hours of instrument flying, and the last of which was 10 months prior to the accident, back in February 2022. In August, he obtained his first commercial aviation job. Is there any first-year pilots in the room? Yep, cool. He got through his ICUS after flying 14 flights, totaling 53 hours in Katherine. All of this was in the dry season, unfortunately. He obtained his check to line on the 20th of September, and on the 1st of December, he was relocated to Gove, where he flew for a further 45 hours, and then 3 weeks later was the accident flight. During the ICUS program, the pilot, he was, I guess, from the operator's perspective, he was considered to make sound decision-making skills. He had the ability to make these sound decisions, particularly around weather. That was at least the comment we had heard back from this pilot. During the ICUS program, he became familiar with the area, and he flew to local remote communities and station properties throughout the Big Rivers, Top End, and East Arnhem regions. He knew Bullman because he'd been there 3 times. One of the things we look at is the pilot's 72-hour history as part of any of these investigations. He did some flying on the 23rd of December. The previous 2 days did not fly. One of them was due to weather. He flew locally, accumulating 5.7 hours on the 23rd. On the 24th, we've got an absence of data. We need to know what this young guy was thinking on the day. We consulted his NAIPS login records. We knew that he accessed the NAIPS at 6:59, 7:02, 7:12. What he was looking at, what he was downloading during that particular period, as he was at the Katherine base, we don't know. We don't know whether he necessarily downloaded the GAF for that area. We do know that he accessed GPWT, grid point wind and temperature. So, a little bit about the weather. Was anyone around here? There's probably quite a few of you around here on the 2022. Cyclone Ellie. Yep. Thanks. It just come through on the 23rd, but it was downgraded to a tropical low on the 24th of December. But flooding, heavy rain, strong and damaging winds impacted large parts of the top end. For everyone who's seated, there is a GAF under your seat. So I've got to say, as a non-pilot, at the start of this investigation, I didn't know a lot about the GAFs. I know a little bit more now, but we have an expert in the room who will probably talk a bit more about that later on. This was the GAF which was downloaded, which was available for the flight from Gove to Katherine. You can see there's 2 areas, Area A and Area B. Area A was looking okay, but Area B was much more dynamic and complex. When there was light rain present, you were kind of expecting cloud for over 100% of the area. When there was moderate rain and showers present, there was occasional towering cumulus clouds covering 50 to 75% of the area from 2,000 and above 10,000 feet. Broken stratus clouds from 500 to 2,000 feet, and broken cumulus clouds from 2,000 to above 10,000 feet for more than 50% of the area. Pretty challenging. When there were thunderstorms of rain, there was isolated CBs covering up to 50% of the area from 2,000 feet to above 10,000, and broken stratus clouds covering more than 50% of the area from 500 to 2,000 feet. So Area A is very clear here in the GAF, and then Area B. And here is our accident site, right here. One of the things that we looked at, because we've got an absence of data, is the analysis of satellite imagery, which is available from the bomb. And for us, that indicated from about 9 o'clock, convective cloud developed to the west of the accident site. The cloud really developed into thunderstorms as forecast in the GAF, with lightning recorded between 9:40 and 9:50. This is en route. I'm going to show you the satellite imagery in a second. And certainly it showed that a severe weather system had developed en route. So interestingly, in the next slide, we've got some thermal overlays. Red is bad, black is even worse. We've got cloud heights up to between 38,000 and 46,000 feet. So this here, I'll explain this image, is the satellite overlay. It's taken at 8:30 a.m. Our guy is somewhere here in Gove, just having departed, and we've got this monster over here. well away from our intended track, but you can see in the GAF, which is in your hand, the line of cloud which delineates area A and area B. Because we didn't have any time, we only had a time when the crash occurred at 10:01, when the passenger's phone ceased communicating with the Bullman Tower. This is the cloud again at 9 o'clock, so 30 minutes later. It's moving south, southeast. Our guy is yet to appear on screen. At 9:30, things are starting to develop in front of him. In area B, we've got some thermal activity starting up here. This is time, so 10:01, 9:55, 9:48, 9:40, and so on. And this bullseye is just kind of to draw your attention close into the accident site. At 9:40, things are starting to get more severe for our guy. He's still in area A, but we suspect he hasn't diverted too far at this point. 11 minutes before the accident, satellite imagery shows lightning strikes all through this area. This is incredible technology, all through up here and around here. So a thunderstorm is now underway. It is 55 kilometers radially from the accident site. And finally, this image is not too good, which we got here at 9:55. Again, there's a thunderstorm directly in front of him. This is the question I have, and this is maybe the question you have. We think that it should have, well, we're pretty sure it should have been visible. It wasn't embedded, but like, why didn't he go down here? We don't know. We do have radar data, but this is a 737 as it's diverting around that thunderstorm. At around 9:30, our guy is still out here. So this massive cell was visible and certainly avoided by the commercial airliner. I should say that the BOM in their analysis of this indicated that near the accident site from this thunderstorm, they would have been resulting in severe turbulence, severe icing, wind shear with outflows of strong and gusty winds, not only in the immediate vicinity of the thunderstorm, but also some distances away. An automated weather station near Bullman, down here, recorded 12.4 millimeters of rain between 9:30 and 10:30 that morning. The development of the severe weather was consistent with the forecast for isolated thunderstorms in the Northern Territory GAF, the one which you have in your hand. Self-induced pressure. I've experienced it across many areas. You guys have probably experienced it across many areas. Did the pilot experience this and like he's got the weather forecast in front of him? Could this have led him, this factor's coming in now, we're sort of starting to get a bit of a picture of what's going on. Could he have had self-induced pressure? The pilot was described by their co-workers in the HOFO for Catherine Aviation as professional and meticulous with their selection of speed and power settings whenever operating the 210 aircraft. They had good en route weather making skills. A few days prior to the accident, the pilot turned back in a flight when weather conditions were unfavourable. So we knew he had the capacity to turn back. So we also know that perceived or self-induced pressure is specific to each pilot and may come from a range of sources. It may not be evident or easily identifiable and can vary from experienced to non-experienced pilots. Not every flight will result in some sort of self-imposed pressure. Must get it done. In this case, we couldn't make a determination of whether or not it existed. It's quite difficult unless you actually speak to the person. We do know that there was a patient transfer flight. It was their third attempt, so maybe that was part of it as well. 100 hourly maintenance was due on the aircraft. There's also a keen desire amongst a lot of young pilots to build hours because that's going to be their career progression. This was a good flight. The other aspect to this, there was limited availability of pilots due to Christmas leave at the base. The pilot had no one to talk to and really bounce these considerations off anyone. Countering that is that the operator had no expectation, and that was clearly defined in their exposition and other reference material and speaking with their pilots, for them pilots to push through. If weather was marginal, there was no requirement for pilots to complete a flight. So very hard to assess, but I'm sure that people in this room can relate to some of these things up on the screen there. Interestingly, Catherine Aviation had some really good training package for their pilots. It was a wet season demonstration. Unfortunately, this young pilot we don't know whether he actually completed that training package. It was a PowerPoint which was made available for their pilots. It wasn't compulsory and it wasn't delivered, but it was something that a pilot could look at in their free time. They had some good advice in there. Do not initiate quick roll maneuvers or large turns in severe weather. May significantly increase the G loading on wings, and rapid roll movements will apply further stresses to the aircraft. Take your turns slowly. Always control the aircraft. Something that I think should be done. Determine the intensity of the turbulence. Do not chase altitude adjustments. Slowly reduce your power settings. You can slow your aircraft down. This is one, I think, from the previous slide. Using the landing gear, this is on the 210, but it has to be below certain speed. One of the things I think they highlighted, which was really clear, if you are diverting around a thunderstorm and it is turbulent, then you are probably too close. Turbulence significantly increases the G loading on your wings. G loading limits are assessed on vertical movements of air pressure and not applied to twisting moments on wings. So I think, the 10 nautical miles, 20 nautical mile margin needs to be applied, and it wasn't in this case. This is not the first time this has happened. Some of you may have been around or may have heard of this one. There was one tragic accident involving 2 young pilots, double wing failure, 2017. Similar circumstances, but they were in around Darwin. They were flying to Elcho Island, and they had to divert their flight to avoid bad weather, but they could not. They did not divert far enough away from that bad weather, and it led to excessive loading on the aircraft wing and a double separation almost instantaneously. In 2019, there was severe turbulence event involving SJW up there. Interestingly, with this one, so they were going from Darwin to Tyndall, and soon after departure, they diverted 5 nautical miles off track to avoid thunderstorm. During the turbulence, the aircraft airspeed could not be controlled for several minutes. Could not be controlled. For the most part, the airspeed could not be held below 155 knots. The pilot had no control over bank angle, height, or heading. That would be very scary. The passengers had to go to hospital, but yeah, terrifying circumstance. And this is just sort of one example. I don't know whether or not that would have happened with TFT, but it would have been pretty horrific. Our findings. Every ATSB investigation does have findings, and I'm going to sort of talk you through some of the analysis behind those findings. So this was, and it will be a little bit of a repeat from what I've just said, but it sort of brings it all together. This was the pilot's first commercial aviation role, and was also their first period operating through a Northern Territory wet season. They'd completed their line training with the operator in September during the dry season, and after deployment from Catherine, had flown for approximately just 3 weeks from the operator's base in Gove. During that period, they had turned back previously on encountering severe weather. We consider it, the ATSB and the investigation, consider it likely that while completing flight planning earlier that morning, the pilot, he probably had accessed it, although we can't absolutely prove it. The GAF, the one which is in your hand, and other flight, weather planning tools that describe the predicted weather en route to Catherine. Supporting that was the pilot's previous flight planning records, where all the necessary information had been obtained and documented, and we found those. So we knew he did what he was meant to do. The pilot had mentioned in conversation to the Catherine Aviation operations staff member on the morning of the accident the weather appeared to be a bit iffy, which also supported the notion that the pilot had obtained and accessed the en route weather forecast. though most operational staff were on leave that day, including the GOV senior base pilot and head of flying operations at Catherine Aviation, there were operational staff in place and on duty at the main base for consultation to assist young Reese with decision making surrounding the conduct of the flight. Additionally, Bureau of Meteorology staff who had produced the forecast remained available as an informed source to provide weather advice. Increasingly severe weather conditions were predicted to develop from the prevailing cloud coverage during the validity of the period of the GAF. Visibility was expected to be between 500 and 2,000 metres for rain showers, which was significantly below that required for visual meteorological conditions. Towering cumulus and cumulonimbus clouds were also forecast to develop from the cumulus cloud cells at different times and locations throughout Area B during the forecast period. The satellite imagery showed that the cloud formation around Bullman developed rapidly, as I showed you in those sequence of slides, into convective clouds as the aircraft approached the area. It was accompanied by lightning strikes at 9:40 and confirmed that the TCU and CBs had further developed into a thunderstorm. Depending on the proximity to these weather phenomena, it is also likely that the aircraft encountered severe turbulence associated with the convective action. Furthermore, because the satellite imagery confirmed that the prevailing overcast conditions did not exist in the Bullman region in the lead up to the accident, there was probably sufficient separation between the convective cloud formations associated with the developing thunderstorm for it to have been visible to the pilot. But unfortunately, we'll never know the severity of the conditions and how visually apparent that thunderstorm was. The operator's procedures required a 20 nautical mile downwind separation from thunderstorms, and it was expected good practice that a flight was to be diverted upon encountering such phenomena. If severe turbulence was encountered, pilots were to slow the aircraft and to avoid rapid maneuvers. It was not possible to determine the pilot's precise actions during this final period of the accident flight. Had they been using the weather radar application on the iPad during the flight, it is possible that the extent of the developing storm near to Bullman was not evident due to the storm's significant distance from the weather radar head. Sam's going to talk a little bit about that later. This may have led to the pilot not perceiving the potential severity of the storm as they approached the Bullman region. We've got another finding there, and that talks about the aircraft maneuvering speed and the reason why the wing came off, and it's pretty self-evident. It was probably being maneuvered during severe turbulence above the maneuvering speed at that time. One thing that we encourage within the ATSB is after a tragedy, we look at safety action. The one thing that really struck me was that for this particular flight, it was a commercial aviation flight, there was no flight tracking. The operator introduced flight tracking devices very soon after. Like everyone knows where everyone is these days. How can you not know where an aircraft is out in the middle of, like, you should know this, right? The wet season training became compulsory for all pilots, no matter how senior they were in the company. And they also introduced a flight assessment tool and pre-flight risk assessment for every flight. I thought this was quite good, and it's actually contained in the back of our investigation report, which some of them are printed out up there. And if you want to get an idea on some of the questions that were being asked through this risk assessment tool, which was developed by the Catherine Aviation staff, that's in the back end of that report. And sometimes, in these circumstances, the pilot might not necessarily have, I guess, like they might be rushed, they're trying to meet a deadline, but they were asking questions. And if the answer to any of those questions were no, then you really needed to make another assessment, such as, are all the prevailing flight conditions above the VFR minima? Have you gathered and reviewed all the available weather information? Are thunderstorms forecast in vicinity no greater than isolated is moderate or higher turbulence forecast. Can you remain 10 nautical miles upwind or 10 nautical miles downwind from a thunderstorm? Have you discussed this with your senior base pilot, training captain, or HOFO? Are you personally satisfied that the demands of the flight are within your personal minima or experience level? So I do encourage you to get a copy of that, bring it back to work and share it amongst your pilot friends, because it may prompt them to ask those same questions. So, a safety message. We're all here to talk about the wet season and how challenging it can be. Rapidly developing and frequent thunderstorms with associated severe turbulence present pilots with a challenging and hazardous operating environment. You need to identify and maintain adequate clearance from thunderstorms, which is critical to your flight safety. The US FAA recommend 20 nautical miles, which I think is fair, but sometimes you might need more than that, and maybe you agree, I don't know. Use the BOM forecast to carefully plan your flight. And if in doubt, there's a BOM forecaster available to answer any questions. I also encourage you, as a safety message, to review the other CASA flying in the wet season seminars. There's some really experienced talks on that CASA website. And that concludes my presentation and summary of what happened to GFT at Bournemouth. Thanks very much.
It's my pleasure to introduce Sam Bethune. Sam is a senior forecaster with the Bureau of Meteorology that puts out the aviation weather forecasts. Sam is based in Brisbane, and he comes from a background in physics, having completed a grad dip in meteorology at the Bureau's training centre in Melbourne back in 2021. He currently works at the Brisbane Aviation Forecasting Centre and has certainly a strong interest in all things meteorological. A particular highlight, I was chatting to Sam earlier, a particular highlight of his job has been nights like this. And Sam did present at our last seminar, and we're delighted to have him back to work with pilots to help all of us manage risk better. So if you would join me, please, in welcoming Sam Bethune.
Thanks very much, Tim, and thank you very much for having me tonight. Thanks for coming out, making the time. I'll get right into it. So my presentation tonight will be in two parts. The first will be general wet season information, particularly targeted at those of us who may be more familiar with weather in the south. And the second will be information specific to the case study that Simon has been discussing with us. First of all, I want to discuss some differences between the north and the south. So in the south, 4 seasons in a day, we've all heard it. And in the north, we've got a different arrangement. You wake up in the build-up and it's stinking hot, and then it will become stinking hot and stormy and progress to stinking hot and maybe stormy in the night. And then this could go on repeat for 2-3 weeks easily. So less variation in a sense in the north. The reason for this, in the south, we've got a cold front like this one that could run through Victoria in a day, easy, 2-3 different air masses with it, different weather environments with each of those. Meanwhile, in the north, see that lack of pressure gradient up there? That's going to be all basically the same air mass at the surface at least, and those features move slowly. So like that heat low out there in the Pilbara, that will usually be there for months, on and off. And that low there, ex-tropical cyclone Ellie, the same as on the GAF that you've got with you, was in the top end in the Kimberley for 2 weeks. The way that the seasons come and go in the Northern Territory is very different as well. So in the south, I always think it's a bit of a miracle when you have seasonal change. It can be winter for 2 to 3 months, and then it just snaps out into spring. And while parts of the wet season, you have, your monsoon, and we're going to talk about this in a second, can come on like that, the transition from dry to wet and back again is not like that at all. It's gradual. Happens one step at a time. So those are some differences in the timescales between the north and the south. And the other one I want to talk about, for those of you perhaps new in town, are the differences in severity. So in the south, 20 millimeters is a soaking. That's going to make the evening news maybe. But in the north, 200 millimeters in a day, not unheard of at all, particularly in Queensland where you've got the ranges. The reason for this, the air is basically just hotter. So that can absorb a whole lot more moisture, and also your ideal gas law, for those of you who might know about that one, the atmosphere is just a lot taller. So in the winter, in the south, a thunderstorm could cap out at 15,000 feet, but in the north, in the summer, usually above 50,000 feet. So a big difference there. Those are the main differences that I wanted to talk about. And now I want to discuss just some phases of the wet season, because it's not like, summer that you might be used to, where it's all pretty similar. In the wet season, we're going to start off in the build-up, which is usually coming on late September, early October, and that's what we're coming into right now. And the build-up is a stormy time. So you're going to have quite a lot of moisture around the low levels in the top end, and in the upper levels, you'll have dry air coming up from Alice Springs as a southeasterly, from say 5,000 to 25,000 feet, coming up over Darwin. And the effect of that is that you're going to get quite a lot of organised convection forming. So the thunderstorms come up, and then the southeasterlies are strong and sheared aloft. So they'll be moving pretty quickly, and you'll get squall lines. Squall lines are your big risk in the build-up. And all the while this is going on, you've got the monsoon trough, which will be start off around the equator and gradually drift down toward the south. As it does so, conditions are usually going to start intensifying around the top end. And when the monsoon trough gets close enough that it actually breaks over the top end, then we go into the active monsoon. So that usually starts around Christmas Day, usually actually very punctual sometimes. And that's going to be, rather than a stormy time, it's going to be rainy. So before we had our dry southeasterlies aloft at Darwin, and now it's going to be the opposite. We've got northwesterlies between, say, 5 and 25,000 feet, and they're going to be really moist, having come all the way from across the equator. So not as many storms, but a lot of rain and a lot of squally showers, a lot of heavy weather. So the active monsoon, that can last usually about a week, more or less. And eventually the air's got to be coming from somewhere. It will be coming from Siberia, and you'll get that high pressure system there will sort of run out of puff for a minute. When that happens, the monsoon trough, which has been over the top end causing all this, is going to retreat just offshore. And when it does that, we're sort of neither one place nor another. We don't have these organised storms getting around. We just have a few storms popping up, and we don't have the rain. So the translation for you at the surface is that it's just been raining really heavy in the active monsoon, and now nothing's happening, and it's absolutely really humid and stinking hot, and you don't even get an afternoon thunderstorm to cool down. So not very pleasant. You might get a thunderstorm, but it'll probably be early morning. Those are the main ones to bear in mind. And the general progression here is that you're going to start off with the build-up beginning late September, early October, and then it's going to get more and more until you get to active monsoon, the first one, around late December. And then they'll come and go, active monsoon break, and bits that are sometimes a bit more like the build-up. That'll continue generally till early April, and then you start backing off. We're starting the transition backwards. So it's getting a bit more like the build-up, but in reverse. And then usually by about mid-May, where we're usually coming good, you should be right by then, back in the dry. Those are the main things that I wanted to convey, all pretty elemental at this stage, but there are two messages that I really want to hammer home. And the first is about the severity of the thunderstorms up here. In the south, still every thunderstorm is severe, but in the north, very severe. So you might not get hail at the surface, but there will always be hail in these storms aloft, usually above 10,000 feet, but not always. You're going to have icing above that as well, heaps of severe icing, and a lot more lightning than a storm in the south, which could definitely be an issue. But all that is not even getting at the main problem, which is turbulence. But thunderstorm updrafts can exceed 100 knots, which is an absolutely incredible amount of force. And a lot of the time, that updraft will be next to the downdraft. So, or at least quite close to it. So you're going to have massive amounts of vertical shear. The Raffies at Tyndall, regularly hitting Mark II and incredible G-forces in their planes, and they don't go anywhere near thunderstorms. They have a special Met on site to help them not go near storms. So think what the implications are for the rest of us. For those of us who are from the south, you might be used to seeing gaps a bit more like this one on the left, which is a New South Wales East gap. You can see a lot of lines, a lot of sub-areas, a lot of phenomena. So you've got all this severe turbulence, severe mountain waves, severe icing, snow, rain, cloud on ground, all this stuff going on, freezing levels. And on the north, in the right, it's easier to think it's just storms and showers. And in a sense, that's true, but the weather on this gap on the right, which is the one that you've got with you, is a lot worse than the one on the left, even though this forecast product on the left is more detailed and you might say more sophisticated. In general, just because the forecast is simple does not mean that the weather is simple or that the weather is safe. A lot of the time in the territory, you'll see taps with maybe 2 lines on them, just a mean line, and then a prob 30 for thunderstorms at some point. There could be a surprising amount of forecast reasoning and sophisticated weather behind that. Just because it is routine does not mean that it is safe. A big thing for us is decision making on top of that. So you want to check out the airport weather briefing, which you can find on our website there. That's a really great product that some people aren't so familiar with. So it's a Darwin airport weather briefing. It's going to have a plain language summary of the Darwin TAF, along with some synoptic information about what's going on. It'll also have some other goodies, like you'll have things that might not have made it to the TAF, so a slight chance of alternate cloud overnight, things like that, maybe some wind shear at times that probably isn't enough for a wind shear warning. And then also just information about thunderstorms in the terminal area, which might be, there might be storms expected just offshore in the morning a lot of the time that we don't think will actually get to the airport, so no prob 30, but there will be storms around. And if you still have questions and concerns after reading that document, or your questions and concerns aren't about Darwin, then please do give us a call. So the GAF that you've got with you, in the bottom left corner, you will see a phone number, and that is for the NTE aviation forecaster. So that person, that desk will be staffed 24/7, 365. You can call at 2 a.m. if you have any concerns, whatever. And that person will always be across these products because they'll be doing the NT GAF, all the TAFs within it, and if there are SIGMETs, AirMets, other warnings, they'll be in charge of that as well. So if you do give us a call, which we encourage you to do, the best ones we get are generally the ones where you tell us a little bit about your operation. So maybe you've got a milk run out in the East Arnhem, and there are maybe some organised storms around there. And if we can rub our heads together, then that's when we'll often reach the best decisions, just trying to manage that risk. Those ones are really good. And also, if you're thinking the weather is looking off at your destination and you're contemplating backing down on that one today, often a great thing to do to justify your decision is to ring up the Bureau and sound them out. We understand VFR operations and we know the limitations that places on you. And if you explain to the forecaster that you're a VFR operator and that you're concerned about the weather, and they will most of the time back up your decision as long as the weather is permitting, which can be good. The other thing is feedback as well. If something really has worked for you or really has not, please let us know. It's great to be on top of that stuff, and also observations. Turbulence, we have no way to observe it other than directly through pilot calls. And if you happen to see like low cloud around underneath cirrus, we won't be able to see that. And if it's not on the gaps, very helpful. We're going to talk about the case study now. So I've got 3 little bits here. The first one is just running over the weather in the lead up to it. So I've got the products that you guys would be looking at. The radar loops, the TAFs, that sort of thing, charts. So you can just step inside what the pilot would have been seeing in the days leading up and get some context there. And then after that, we're going to talk about GAF reading and also radar interpretation. So the first thing, this is the 22nd of December, so we're 2 days out, and you can see up here off the coast of Darwin, low pressure system in the monsoon trough. Let's have a look at the radar loop from that day. There it is. Tricyclone Ellie, Category 1, rapidly weakens across the coast back to an ex-tropical cyclone. So a lot of rain that day around. You can see the Darwin TAF there has thunderstorms the entire time covered, whether it's a straight tempo or a Prop 30, pretty heavy, and alternate rain on the main conditions from the morning of the 23rd. So pretty heavy TAF. And let's have a look at the 23rd now. So there's ex-tropical cyclone Ellie, as it's labelled on the MSLP map. It's just moved inland, down around the base of the top end. So there's still going to be a lot going on. We can see all this cloud up here, rain associated with that. And now we'll look at the Tyndall radar. A thing to notice is that it's a lot fainter than the Darwin one, and we'll discuss that later. So the TAF there, without getting down in the weeds, again, storms the entire time, whether it's straight tempo or Prop 30. The Prop 30 and tempo are reversed. On Darwin, we had the straight tempo overnight and in the morning, and the Prob elsewhere. This one, we've got the tempo during the day, Prop 30 elsewhere. That's the difference between being upstream of the land or the sea. And now we've arrived at the day of the accident. So, ex-tropical cyclone Ellie, quite far inland now, and just rated as a low on the chart map. You can see, first thing that you might notice is that not that much actually happened at Darwin and Tyndall that day. There wasn't too bad there, but the Tyndall TAF was quite conservative. So Prop 30 for storms all day, 0 to 12, but not overnight, and an inter in the mean conditions for squally showers, and then also just a bit of low cloud overnight. We'll look at some radar scans from that day later when we talk about radar, but what we've got here is just a satellite scan from 00 Zulu on the right in the IR, and on the left side, a bit of an animation through the 6 hours of the GAF validity, so you can see what was happening. It's a little bit blurrier than what I would like, but hopefully illustrative. And one thing you might notice is we've got the site of the accident up there, and it's just tucked in within our B area. So just to quickly run you through this GAF. Area B is the main one, as Simon was saying. That's like your ex-cyclone area, effectively. We've got B1 in there. That's where you're quite close around the cyclone. And then this bit up here where we're on favourable flanks, which we might get to later. Area A is everything else. You can probably see on the GAF in front of you, that's all the other weather. Pretty standard build-up weather in a way. It's just storms and showers. A little bit of rain in A2, but light. And then Area C is nothing. So that's what you've got. You've got your ex-cyclone area, everything else, and then nothing. So the reason I want to discuss the GAFs is that they are a bit tricky. With a TAF, I find, at least when I started learning them, it's pretty straightforward because we're point observers. When we stand on the hill, look around or whatever, that's effectively the TAF. But the GAF, on the other hand, it's a bit of a trickier one because it's from the point of view of a satellite almost. It's not as familiar to us. It can be easy looking at the weather boxes and the description to think what will this be like to fly through and what does it correspond to. So that's what I want to help break down. And the way that I'm going to do it is by sort of an FAQ of things that I've been asked about GAFs in the past, questions that you might have had about this one, or just GAFs in general. So the first one is a bit of an easy one, probably a lot of you will know. But say we're at location X, Y, Z, and we can see on the TAF no storms, and looking around the airfield, that all looks to be well and good. The GAF, however, has storms over it in whatever area that would be. So is the GAF wrong, would be the question. And the answer is probably not. This happens quite a lot, and I think Gove is probably a really good example to look at. So you've got Gove there, right on the east coast, and to drive out there, you go across a peninsula. And that peninsula, standard day during the build-up, is going to get a sea breeze convergence in the middle of it, and a storm will usually spring up from that, most days. And then we already talked earlier about our winds during the build-up from the southeast. So that storm is going to be pushed away from the aerodrome. It'll form to the west and be pushed further to the west. Not much chance it's actually going to hit Gove unless something's out of the ordinary. So you won't find it on the TAF. But to not put it on the GAF, we've actually got to be able to rule it out altogether, really. The GAF is more about, will you have to divert around an isolated storm potentially? And if it's right next to the airfield, you may well have to. So that's why that one is. And it sort of feeds into the next question I want to talk about. So looking at the GAF that you've got, you'll see in area B, we've got scattered 1,000 metre plus SHRA on there. So that's scattered squally showers. And what does that mean exactly? Because say that we're in the early hours of the GAF, we're at OOZ and we're somewhere around here, just a bit west of the accident site, where not much is happening. So you might be looking around as a pilot, ready to take off, thinking, well, I can't see anything, and the GAF is meant to be 50% to 75% squally showers. I should be able to see something, right? What are the chances? The GAF must be overdoing things. And the reason for that is that the GAF is one of these probabilistic forecast products where the probability it's more of a gist of it, like a prob 30 for a thunderstorm, for example. What does that actually mean? Does it mean that there's a 30% chance of getting a storm during the entire validity period? Or that in each individual hour of the prob 30, there is a 30% chance? And the answer is it doesn't mean either of those. When you look it up in the World Meteorological Organization manual, it just means, and I quote, a reasonable chance of a thunderstorm. So a lot of these things, that they've got some probabilistic definition. It's not as strict as all that. And the GAFs, I think, probably for the best, are like that. Sometimes you will see it where it's just this density thing of 50% coverage, but a lot of the time it's more about decision making. So in a setup like this, we'll get convective bands forming between the northeast and the southeast of that low. And those could be 100 nautical miles long, full of TCUs, and fast moving, rapidly developing and decaying also, effectively presenting an impassable obstacle. And you can see that bit just up there to the north of the accident site. You can see it on Simon's radar, satellite scan, sorry, something like that. That was neatly tucked inside the B area there. Is exactly the sort of thing that we're worried about. And those could pop up anywhere, anytime in that B area. That's what it's about. It's not so much the whole thing will be impassable all the time. It's that impassable sections could pop up. I also want to just quickly touch on the cloud there. So you'll see the cloud box for B, broken stratus 1 to 2,000 feet, broken cumulus 2,000 to 8,000, and then broken outcast above that. So again, what does that mean? At face value, you would think that that's just a massive block of cloud from 1,000 to above 10,000 feet. And what it would seem like in that greater than 10 kilometers nil box. But we know that that's not the case, because if that was really what it was, then that would be precipitating, that would be nimbostratus, and there wouldn't be a greater than 10 kilometers nil box at all. It would just be 5,000 meters widespread rain. That would be the best conditions in that area if that were true. So what it actually does mean, I think it's easiest to start with the cumulus stratocumulus layer from 2,000 to 8,000. So you've probably seen it when you fly through something like that, but in real life. You'll have these thin, broken sheets of cloud, and there could be 6 of them between 2,000 and 8,000 feet. And the altitudes of those will rapidly change. We can't forecast that. We're not going to put 6 layers of cloud on the GAF. So we will do this to simplify the matter, because you will find those broken layers in there. And also, it won't be everywhere. There'll just be places where it is that broken layer. And we want to cover the worst stuff in that greater than 10 kilometers nil box that is not associated with precipitation. So that's why that's been done. A bit of a content dump here, sorry, but the other thing I just want to touch on briefly is broken stratus. Most stratus is broken. Scattered stratus is pretty rare just because it's so low that it blocks out the horizon effectively. The roof is lower, so it doesn't take much cloud at all for it to be broken. And we're not expecting that over the whole area, probably just little bits banking up against terrain and then behind precipitation probably, but we can't forecast exactly where. Hence why that broken stratus is throughout the entire area for the whole time, even though you can see on the satellite that it's definitely not everywhere. Moving forward to our radar discussion. This might be a little bit faint from the back, but as Simon was saying to us, the pilot may have accessed the radar just before the accident, and that would have been either the Tyndall one or the Warrawee one. So on the left, we've got Warrawee, 256 kilometres range out there. You can see at the side of the accident, that little red star in there, quite far out. And then I've got the GAF line there, the B line, as well as this red bubble, which is also up here on the Tyndall radar. GAF line's the same as well. And then the site of the accident out there. So again, pretty far out from the radar. And I've got two questions I want to address here. So the first is, why is the Tyndall one so much fainter than the Warrawee one? And the second one, perhaps why doesn't it look that bad in general? Because looking at the Warrawee one, even, that was our cell out there at the time, at the time of the accident, and it might not look that bad to some of you, particularly those from the south. So first of all, my second question, why doesn't it look that bad out there? And the answer is, in short, without getting into it, radar beams bend upwards because the Earth curves down. There's also a bit of a refraction effect that occurs there that usually lessens it, but that's less so in the tropics. So in the tropics, radar beams bend up even more than usual. The result is that when you're way far out, there's only so far down that you can see, and it's usually about 25,000 feet right out there. So that stuff out there, that's probably the top of a towering cumulus. That's really severe. Hence why, if any precipitation is distant and developing, it will be very dangerous. If there's any one thing that you take home tonight from this, distant developing precipitation is very dangerous. The second one I want to go over is why the Warrawee one here on the right, and this is the same little bit of precipitation, is so much more intense than the Tyndall one. And the answer is just that the Tyndall one is older. That's actually vacuum tube technology inside the Tyndall one, similar to a guitar amp or something from the 60s, whereas the Warrawee one is a solid state amplifier that it uses to amplify the signal. So in general, if you're comparing these, you want to take whatever's on the Tyndall one and amplify that signal by about twice the intensity, and that's what would be on the Warrawee one. However, even then, the Warrawee one may underreport. All radar operations are a compromise between conflicting requirements. Whatever you do, you're going to win in some areas and lose in others. And one of the big things you've got to decide when you sight a radar is whether it's going to be a C-band or an S-band. It's a discussion about wavelength. And in the territory, we have C-band radars at all locations. And one of the, there are a lot of advantages to them, but one of the disadvantages is that they attenuate. In heavy rainfall, they do attenuate. So just to illustrate that, on the screen here, on the left, that's a C-band radar scanning from 32 kilometers from about the center of that cluster there. And on the right, that is an S-band radar scanning from 100 kilometers out. And you can see that on the right is so much more intense. So if you know that there's heavy rainfall about, if you're seeing plus qualifiers on the GAF, if the monsoon trough is in town, then whatever you're seeing on the radar is almost certainly an underrepresentation of what is actually happening. Just to round out, A great place to read about a few more things is probably the Knowledge Centre on our website. You can look at quick guides to our products, different types of weather you might find and all that sort of thing up there. Great thing to check out. And that winds it up for me.
I'd like to hand over just very briefly for a couple of minutes to Angus Mitchell. Angus is the Chief Commissioner of the Australian Transport Safety Bureau. And I might just hand over briefly to Angus just to say a few words before we kick it off.
I guess I just want to give you a bit of a perspective from the ATSB. And obviously you've just heard the presentation from Simon around one of the case studies here. I think in my 4 years, I've released maybe 350 reports, of which around 60 have been fatal aviation accidents. Around 120 souls have lost their lives in those accidents. I think I've been to probably 24 of those sites and see firsthand the devastation of when things go wrong and when decision making goes wrong and when risk isn't properly assessed. Even 2 weeks ago, I was at an accident site only hours after it occurred and was there when the father of the pilot and the partner came along. And those things certainly do stick with you. So not only am I the Chief Commissioner, I'm also a father. And my eldest daughter lives up here in Darwin. And she was working for an organisation. During the wet season, she would often have to fly out to West Arnhem Land Community. And she sent me a text one day when I was at the office in Canberra. And it was the flight plan, and I could see that the plane that she was in had been doing a number of big circles. And she said, "Does this look right to you, Dad? The pilot is a bit nervous and won't speak to me." And I wasn't too sure, and I walked in next door to one of the pilot investigators, and I said, who'd done time up here, and I said, "What's this?" And he said, "Well, I'm not too sure, but it looks like potentially he's troubleshooting a problem. I bet he's troubleshooting something with landing gear." And keep in mind that I'm a dad, 3,500 k's away, and a daughter on this plane. And what transpired is he was in fact troubleshooting a problem with landing gear, ended up diverting and went to, maybe to Jabiru, I'm not too sure, obviously larger airfield, emergency services there, and landed safely. But there's a pilot there, has reached out to someone within their organisation, and as it was his boss that he'd rung up and had come up in another plane to have a look at the landing gear, and had then diverted and landed safely. So if there's any message from today around the risk assessments and the data that you're getting and you're about to hear from ATC, it is take the time, because I see almost weekly the devastation of when people don't take the time and when risks are glossed over, not properly understood, that push-on-itis that I'm sure many of you have heard around, or that operating beyond your capability, beyond your skill set, or beyond the capability of your aircraft. And that's very easy to do when you're young and you're starting out. And I know, I was at your age, I was just starting out in the military. But I know that overconfidence and that, I guess, drive to prove yourself can be very strong. But I also know the devastation when that goes wrong. Do take on board what's being presented, because we certainly don't want ATSB having to investigate things that are quite often, in just about all of our cases, completely preventable. And it really takes maturity in a whole system and an ecosystem of an aviation body to make sure that these things are really well addressed. So thank you for the opportunity.
At this point, I'd like to introduce Squadron Leader Stephanie Gartshore. Stephanie is with the Royal Australian Air Force. After graduating from the Defence Force Academy in Canberra, she went to the School of Air Traffic Control at East Sale in Victoria and was posted to 452 Squadron here in Darwin, where Stephanie was responsible for air traffic control at Darwin International Airport for about 5.5 years before being posted down to RAF Base Williamtown in 2016, where she was working down there. In 2020, Squadron Leader Gartshore became the Staff Officer at Headquarters Surveillance and Response Group. During this time, she qualified as a Test Director for Operational Test and Evaluation at the National Test Pilot School in Mojave, California. In 2022, Stephanie deployed to South Sudan in support of the ADF's contribution to the UN mission in South Sudan as the Military Aviation Safety Officer. In January 24, Squadron Leader Gartshore returned to Darwin and took up the position as Ops Commander of 452 Squadron, Darwin Flight here in Darwin. And from next month, she will take up the position of Flight Commander for this unit. For a really good, impactful presentation on some of the things to do with ATC and how they can be of assistance to you, will you join me in welcoming Steph Gartshore?
Thank you, first of all, to our CASA representatives for organising tonight's event, but also thanks to all of you for taking out the time to attend and really learn from each other and learn from the presenters that we have here today. These seminars are a fantastic opportunity for us to take a moment to recade our brains on what to expect moving into the wet season. And for those who are new to Darwin, have we got anyone in the audience here today who's never flown in a wet season? Yeah, a couple. No, that's good. This is really aimed at you guys. This will provide the opportunity to learn what to expect moving forward, but also to leverage the experience of those around you so that you know at least what to expect when the weather starts to get really tricky. Now, across the road over at the ATC complex, wet season tends to be treated like an entirely different qualification, where controllers who have spent the last few months honing their skills with 40 nautical miles of uncontested airspace, a robust traffic management plan, 2 runways and LASO, now find themselves rapidly running out of room for point aircraft, with multiple aircraft on the vectors, fast-moving storm cells, wet runways, deteriorating fuel states, and that inevitable Leroy Jenkins, territory VFR pilot, insisting they are fine to continue tracking to the field despite the 6 aircraft ahead of them who are all reporting IMC conditions. Wet season can be complex and it can be unforgiving. It's important not to pay off the lessons and the risk mitigations that we talk about today, because they could mean the difference between all of you being able to go home to your families, with your mates at the end of the day, or becoming another unfortunate business. This is the scope of what I'll discuss today. If you have any questions, as Tim mentioned, hold them to the end or come find me afterwards and have to answer. So once the wet season really kicks in and the net briefing to Darwin starts to take up half of an A4 page, you can expect the weather to transition very quickly.
The worst of the weather tends to hit in the afternoon in the middle of wet season, with lines of thunderstorms rolling mostly east to west across the airspace, sometimes followed by brief periods of almost clear skies below 10,000. Now, these cells can grow rapidly, change direction, and make it difficult for ATC to plan the best sequence and flight paths for you to take. By the time that Tower has promulgated Terminal Information Charlie, conditions may already be warranting Terminal Information Delta to be pushed out. Low clouds, heavy rain will make remaining in VMC very difficult, and the pressure changes and resulting wind both ahead and following a storm will likely result in wind shear and short notice runway changes. Now, as air traffic control, we do our best to anticipate the wind, but please keep in mind that here at Darwin, we've only got a centre field wind anemometer. We don't have threshold wind indicators. The only indication we have are from windsocks. So we can't often predict exactly when the wind swing is going to happen. Now, because of these factors, ATC will slow down our processes to support the flexibility required in these circumstances. Where a VFR, general aviation aircraft, is usually lower in the list of priorities set out in ARP for air traffic management, the season will produce conditions that will very quickly bump them up to the top of the list. When LASO and the crossing runway are likely to be unavailable for periods due to cloud and visibility conditions and no runway lights, ATC are certainly under the pump, and we understand that you will be as well. Both your workload and our workload can increase significantly at very short notice during the wet season. For those who attended the CASA safety seminar in August, you would have heard me speak about the increased cognitive load on controllers whenever we issue you a vector or a heading. During wet season, we can easily have 10 plus aircraft all under vectors, all with competing and evolving requirements. Inside the cockpit, you will be processing a very high volume of rapidly changing information under a lot of pressure. Now, as Simon already alluded to and Angus spoke about as well, there are some common traps that we see time and again here at Darwin. And if they're not understood and recognised early, can catch aircrew out. One of these is press-on-itis or push-on-itis, or those self-induced pressures that Simon talked about. It's the tendency of pilots or crews to continue flight despite deteriorating weather conditions or warning signs. Now, the pressure felt by pilots in these moments is often exacerbated by your tight schedules, your lack of available accommodation or handling services at remote locations, or the incoming weather itself. It's not a habit that's unique to GA single pilot aircraft. I've seen it happen with RPT crews and military crews where groupthink forces people to make illogical conclusions, to continue through worsening weather, bypassing alternates despite your training. Additionally, once a flight has passed the midpoint of its route, psychological and operational factors tend to increase your likelihood of continuing the flight towards the destination rather than diverting. Now, in 2005, ATSB published a research report which did a deep dive into pilot behaviours in the face of adverse weather. I highly recommend you jump online and have a look at the information in there. The report, based on a set of 491 aviation accident and incident reports drawn from the ATSB occurrence database, found that over 61 of occurrences that they looked at happened after the psychological halfway point of the planned flight. The number certainly suggests an increase in risk tolerance by pilots as you reach your goal. The report itself emphasised that a safe pilot is a proactive pilot, that dealing with adverse weather is not a one-off decision, but a continually evolving process. It's not enough to nominate your planned diverts prior to your flight. You must continually update the plan and be prepared to execute the plan for it to be effective. Another issue we see with the high turnover of aircrew through the territory is inexperienced pilots who are unfamiliar with recognising or compensating for the adverse weather, particularly the type of weather that we see up here. Those who are not used to recognising the signs or understanding just how quickly a cumulonimbus can develop, as Sam alluded to, and predicting the effect of the microburst or low-level shear are more likely to underestimate their severity or react too late. So what can air traffic control do for you? Well, we can provide updates on conditions at the field based off what we can see from the tower and what our anemometer is and windsocks are telling us. Beyond that, our access to weather information is much the same as yours. We have the rain radar that the Bureau provides and access to the Bureau Thunderstorm Alert Service. We can relay what other pilots along your flight path have encountered, facilitate holding in clear weather and in controlled airspace, and assist with divert planning and onwards coordination with Brisbane Centre if you need it. Now, what can't we do? We can't predict exactly what is going on in your cockpit if you don't tell us. We don't know what turbulence you're experiencing or how hard you're fighting to maintain track and altitude. We also can't predict the weather. We leave that to the experts like Sam. We can only report on what we observe, and we're unable to accurately assess the weather outside of 5 nautical miles of the aerodrome. Beyond that, we're as reliant as you are on the Bureau of Met feeds and pilot reports. We can tell you if there is a significant storm cell painting up in your path, but the information we have does not always present in real time and might not always be accurately reflecting what you're experiencing. I would like to give each and every one of you exactly what you need to make your flight as smooth as possible. But sometimes there are other aircraft in the way, or there might be weather in the way that you haven't seen. There may also be other aircraft coming in for the opposite runway who have priority due to their fuel states or their inability to maintain flight in VMC. I also can't guarantee you a special VFR clearance. AOP has very specific conditions on special VFR flight. And if an IFR flight is going to be unduly delayed, then ATC will be instructing holding or recommending a divert. So in order to avoid finding yourself in a tricky situation, plan your diverts and be prepared to execute that plan. I can't stress that enough. It's not a good plan if you're not prepared to end up in that remote location. It is crucial that you manage your fuel appropriately because holding will be likely. And those of you who've flown during some of our major exercise periods, you'd know just how critical fuel can become during the dry season. In wet season, when your diverts are slowly disappearing on you, it's even more critical. Consider the possibility of up to 2 go-rounds or missed approaches when the weather is really bad overhead the field. Nominate your alternate. Make sure you don't dip below the fuel required to get there unless you are assured of a landing at Darwin. On commencement of holding, start looking at your latest divert time because we will start chasing your endurance. And we will base our priority on the number that you give us along with all the other endurance we're getting. Don't wait to the last minute to make a decision. Don't let yourself get to min fuel with no option of diversion while you're sitting overhead lee point, cutting orbits and waiting for a gap. Be aware of your own limitations and be cognizant of those common traps I discussed earlier. The boiling frog situation can happen to even the most experienced pilots. And finally, communicate. If you really need a specific level or tracking, don't just request it. Tell us you require it due reason. The more information that we as air traffic control have, the better we can support you and better we can facilitate your ability to maintain safe and level flight. So to wrap up, our greatest aim for you, the reason why air traffic control exists is so that you get to make it home safely at the end of your flight. So I urge all of you to really consider what we chat about today. Talk amongst each other, leverage the experience in the room, and share those lessons. Educate yourselves on the risks and don't take chances with your lives.
Braden Blennerhassett, after learning to fly at the age of 16, like many of us in this room, he started his career actually by doing a trade qualification to become an aircraft maintenance engineer. After that, gaining his commercial licence and embarked really on his career in central Queensland. Back in 2011, he moved to the Northern Territory, began flying charter operations out in Arnhem Land, and then back in 2012, moved to Darwin and onto twin-engined aircraft. Shortly thereafter, gaining his ATPL, he began flying with the RFDS, the Royal Flying Doctor Service, based out of Broken Hill. Came back to Darwin, did Braden, in 2017 to fly Dash 8s, undertaking maritime surveillance for Australian Border Force. He rose through the ranks with that organisation, becoming a Dash 8 captain, senior base pilot and head of turboprop operations, supervisory pilot and also ground school instructor. 2 years ago, in 2023, Braden actually received an award for Aviation Safety Professional of the Year at the Australian Aviation Awards. Last year, Braden took a career and lifestyle change by moving back into the world of the RFDS with his wife and young son, currently based as a line pilot with the RFDS down in Dubbo. Please put your hands together for our subject matter expert, Braden Blennerhassett.
Thanks for having me back again. It goes to show if you spend enough time up here, you get dragged into these things. And it's good to see you all here because it's something I wish I had back in the day when I first started flying up here. Without further ado, that's me. Tim's basically summed up my career to date. I'm currently flying King Airs out of Dubbo at the moment. I'm tied up in the training innovation role that they have At the moment, I'm building a cabin trainer and helping to refit it into a procedural trainer for the guys here. Sorry, the guys down in Dubbo. I was with Leidos or Cobham flying the Dash 8s, and I've got about 3,000 hours, give or take, flying piston engine charter up this way, both for Air Frontier and Jardair, that you probably recognise. I spoke to some of you out in the crowd this evening, and yeah, it's good to see that there's some new guys, new faces coming through. I was an airborne observer for a couple of years, and yeah, I've got a trade qualification as an aircraft maintenance engineer. And that's Jane, the flight nurse. I threatened to put her in this presentation, so there she is. You can see her at the end of the arrow. Where we operate, we've got bases for the southeastern section, obviously in Broken Hill, Bankstown, Dubbo, Essendon, and we obviously service, or maybe not obviously, Lonnie as well, down in Tassie. So we've got the contract down there. We've got King Airs, 200s and 350s. We do retrieval, hospital transfers, non-emergency patient transfers, and clinics. If you want a little bit more info of what we do, you'll find me down the back there if you haven't gone home already. That's where we operate. Southeastern covers up and just into the Queensland border, across into South Australia. You actually can't see it, but the Moomba oil and gas fields. We have a base down in Essendon, and we cover down into Tassie. We also cover out to Lord Howe Island as well, and yeah, we go out there from time to time. So for the key points for tonight, talk about the weather seasons, planning, decision making, weather avoidance. Just keep in mind that these are my views. It's not a comprehensive guide on how to fly up here in the Territory. It's only based on my personal experience. The Adelaide River. You'll get to know that if you haven't seen it already. Yeah, looks really nice this time of the year when it's not covered in cloud. Weather, basically 3 seasons, if you will. Build up, kicks into gear at mid-September, out through late December. That time around Christmas time, you can expect it to start pouring rain here. Wet season, late December through to March, generally speaking. And then March, everything sort of tapers off a bit. And then that last week of April, first week of May, if you've got friends, family coming up this way, cracker time to come up. The dry season's just started to kick into gear, and it's still nice and green outside, and the smoke out to the east hasn't kicked off yet. If you see that on the forecast, for those up the back that need to read a night chart, it says Darwin, TAF, Cab OK, unexpected adventure. So you see that in the middle of the wet, maybe start calling Sam or thinking about taking the fuel anyway. So I suggest that you take the fuel. Build up threats, high temps and humidity. This is going to affect your takeoff performance. So if you're in heavily loaded Chieftain 402, you're going to be doing the curvature of the Earth departure. Afternoon, evening storms. So yeah, you're going to need holding fuel in the Arvo. If you don't see it on the TAF, I would highly suggest that you take it, because there are unforeseen last minute changes, and that's where this storm's rolling in. You can see that that's early morning, and they can get quite nasty. So just be prepared for that out until late December. Wet season threats. Okay, so late December onwards, low cloud, widespread rainfall. Okay, so think airstrips that you can and can't get into, dirt strips and whatnot. If you go there, land, you might get bogged. Low visibility, very much so. So this is where your special VFR comes in, embedded thunderstorms. Yeah, for you IFR guys without weather radar, I would seriously consider staying visual as much as you can in the wet season, despite whether you've got the instruments to do it or not, despite whether you've got weather radar or not. Holding fuel, okay, basically wet season is going to be 60 holding. If it's not 60 holding and you think it's an alternate, phone a friend. Talk to your senior base pilot, head of flying operations. That's why they get paid the big bucks. Phone a friend. Alternates. Just keep an eye on things. If the cloud base is low, there's storms everywhere, maybe ask yourself, should I be going out there for the day? Dry season, no holding. Wet season, 60 holding. If it needs an alternate, maybe not go. Dry season threats, this is my favourite. generally speaking, at the start of the dry season, nice and clear, okay? Obviously, a lot of smoke in the dry season. That's starting to taper off now as the storms start to kick into gear, the weather starts to clear up a bit, okay? You can expect times where there'll be less than 5k vis, okay? You might have 5k vis, but it might be straight down, okay? Everybody's been there. No horizon. Yeah, this is my own photo from a 310 one day. From Steph's side of things, the military airspace is going to be active. Plan ahead. EFBs are great these days. You can see what's in red that is active at that point in time. Maybe think ahead if it's not, and just double check that it's not becoming active later in the day. Planning. Okay, so I'm going to start to sort of slow down a little bit and start to get into the nuts and bolts without the deep dive. Okay, so this is photos from a couple of weeks ago. Getting in the king air. Okay, so wet season planning. You guys have got those iPads, the EFBs, are awesome. I wish I had those back in the day. I was lucky to have the GPS up on the dash, and that was it. You know, that was me getting around in the wet season in 210s, Bonanzas, 310s, Barons, 402s. They are fantastic. Okay, so obviously you've got your minimum legal obligation to check out at the start of the day or whenever you go flying. So TAFs, GAFs, airport briefings. Sam showed you how to get hold of the airport briefings in the general section of NAPES. That's correct. Excellent. So they'll keep you safe and legal. The golden tool here is the EFB weather overlays and the TAF pop-ups. And what I mean by the TAF pop-ups is that this is one particular Australian EFB provider. I'm sure some of you recognise it. But en route, you can basically click on the airfield, bring up the weather, and if you've been polling the 4G, 5G reception, you've got all the weather you could possibly want at your fingertips. I missed out on this because EFBs weren't ubiquitous back in my time flying here. And then when I came back on the Dash 8s, we were over the horizon, so there's no phone service out there. Call Sam and his mates. They love it at 3 o'clock in the morning when I call on night shift. Wakes them up. Makes me feel good that there's someone there that I can call and make sure that my tax is going somewhere. Apps and websites. I use Windy. Okay, Windy's great. It gives you satellite picture, the radar. You would have seen, for those who use it, the radar in beta mode. That's been superseded by the infrared satellite picture. However, there is an option, if you deep dive, you can superimpose the weather radar back on it. Okay, just keep in mind with any of these products that they have their limitations, which Sam has discussed earlier on, that, you know, if they can't physically see the weather, basically because it's below the radar horizon, it won't show up there. But that's where the satellite picture is great. It's there. Just take a little bit of time to interpret what the information is telling you. Okay, the BOM has Med-Eye, and that's a good tool as well. Obviously, they've got all their aviation weather in there. It's not approved through NAPES, but it's there. Satellite pictures, radar, you know, make sure that you keep an eye on these things. Webcams. Okay, I appreciate that probably slim pickings up here in the territory. I know that we have one here through Air Services at Darwin. Out remote, maybe not so much, okay? But that's where radar, satellite, your TAFs that you can pick up in your EFBs are great. Pick up the phone, call Sam, call a friend, one of the remote-based pilots that you're going to see or might catch up with later on or hasn't departed, you know, call them. They're on Elko Island or Gove. Pick up the phone. What's the weather doing out there? That's rubbish, don't come, okay? We'll go back home then. Mark 1 eyeball, look outside, you know. If it's poor weather in town, go back, have another coffee, push the flight back another hour, sit around if, you know, you've got the duty time to do it, and, you know, just delay the flight. It might be good in an hour or so's time, okay? You can still get the charter done, happy days. If not, do it tomorrow, okay? And more importantly, these all determine the amount of fuel that I uplift prior to going flying, okay? Take as much as you reasonably can. Otherwise, it determines where I can go on it. That was at a mine site years and years and years ago. I appreciate that to the untrained eye, this is not how you store your jet or your avgas. Store them on this side like this one, because in the wet season, the water will pull on the tops and eventually get into the drums themselves. Okay, so back to the planning. Load as much fuel as you can, okay? It's better to take more than take less. The only time, okay, I'm joking here, that the only time that you can have too much fuel is when you're on fire, okay? And there's some sound advice in that. Flying up here, things change, the weather is dynamic, and fuel gives you options, gives you somewhere to go. Know what your margin fuel is, okay? At the end of our flight plan, after the fuel required, there's a row that says margin fuel, okay? So if you've got margin fuel, that means that you can maneuver, okay? If you're in a 210, you're doing 2.5 miles a minute, you're burning 60 litres an hour, okay, so a litre a minute. You multiply 2.5 by 60, okay, that will give you, if you do it the other way around, you'll get your specific ground range. My point being is that, say you've got 20 litres of fuel, that gives you 50 nautical miles that you can be off track before you even start burning your contingency fuel. Okay, plan your en route airfields. If you're flying from Gove to Darwin, for example, you've got all these en route elements. You've got obviously Elko Island, Ramingining, okay, some of them have fuel or not, Maningrida, Jabiru, they're all there, okay, duck in the South Goulburn Island a little bit earlier on. Ask yourself, can I get fuel there? Because that may determine whether you can weigh going in there or not. Load fuel at your destination. So if you're flying out to Gove, okay, I appreciate the cost of fuel is probably $1 a litre more, okay, but if you need to take on 100 litres of fuel, if $100 is going to break the bank as far as the charter goes, should you really be doing the charter to start with? I appreciate that's not a decision for you to make, but really what I'm trying to get across here is that taking on 100 litres of fuel out remote is not going to break the bank. If you've got the option to do it, do it. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the matrix is or what the wet season is. You have to see it for yourself. And it's true, okay? So I'm going to cut into the decision-making sort of element, okay? And this is all sort of tied up together. There's many decision-making models out there. CASA have Pilot available, okay? The RFDS SE have this model, and I believe a couple other operators share something similar, okay? So all it is just a tool to help you, make decisions, make sound decisions, and more so slow things down, okay, when things are starting to tunnel in. Okay, so just to step through it really quickly, okay, recognize that something is happening, okay. Control, who has control? Do I have an autopilot? Is the autopilot in control? Would it be better if the autopilot is in control? That way it frees me up. I can go down, heads down into the EFB, have a look at the weather, make a sound decision from there. Contain, and am I in IMC? Am I above, lower, safe? Is there terrain ahead? Do I need to do something with the aircraft to keep myself safe? Have I achieved safe flight or not? If I haven't achieved safe flight, I've got to go back to the start and achieve safe flight, because there's no point in trying to make a decision when my head's down and now there's a hill in front of me, okay, or worse. So once I achieve safe flight, I can step over the line, okay? Now I can diagnose, decide, review, and monitor. I can diagnose that, yes, there is a thunderstorm in front of me. Decide, do I go left, right, underneath, over the top? Underneath and over the top's probably not going to work for you, so maybe left or right. Or do I turn around? Okay, once I make that decision and I'm off on my track, I review. Has things changed? Do I need to be doing something else? What's the weather doing in front of me? Okay, and that comes back into the monitoring as well. Okay, are the guys going off and around the bottom of the ILS into Darwin? Are the guys in front of me, not getting into Elko Islands or, Jabiru, Ramingining, Tyndall, etc. Okay, so this is real world. This is me in a 402 one day. I've departed out of Owenpelly out to the right-hand side here. I'm now 75 miles off track. I'm actually closer to Tyndall than Darwin. And then I'm getting myself around into Darwin, okay? And that's how dirty it was out that way in that day. That's 2014, 2015. How's the eye chart going for the guys down the back? Great, yeah, excellent, tough crowd. Weather avoidance, okay, look, especially if you VFR guys, remain visual at all costs, within reason, of course. If you are getting pushed lower and lower and lower and lower, you may need to determine whether I need to execute a 180 or climb into IMC and go from there. Okay, that's the reality of what you may face out there. I would hope before you've got to that point, you've decided to either divert left or right, okay? Climb or descend. I recommend that you, again, just my opinion, it's worked for me. I just kept on going down and down to remain VMC until I get to, 1,500 feet, stress of weather, that kind of stuff, okay? But that has come with an experience. The point being is that if you can't do any of those things, maybe consider turning around. How much fuel do I have? That's going to determine how far I can go, how far off route or off track I can go, whether I can take that 50 miles or not that I gave as the example before. Okay, do I turn around? Goes without saying. Is there more weather ahead? Okay, do you hear guys going off the bottom of the ILS, going around? Is there a METAR speci that Sam's crew has issued and Brisbane Centre have relayed over the radio? Keep an eye on your EFB. Most of Arnhem Land and down south, within reason, have access to 4G and 5G. Okay, it's great. I wish I had it back in the day. If in doubt, call Brisbane Centre, okay, or Brisbane Radio over HF. Get some weather. Get a METAR and or TAF if it's been updated. Get for a couple different spots. Give yourself options. Okay, do not be afraid to go off track. Okay, this is Alcohol Island out to the right. This is Darwin here. Okay, you see I've done the zigzag the whole way there, and while we're en route, we've got Raminginning, Maningreta here, looks okay. We've got Jabiru in this area. I appreciate some of these places don't have fuel. Okay, that's where you're going to have to make a command decision and go, well, how much fuel do I have? Can I continue flight from there on in? Will the boss need to boat me some fuel across? What have you? Okay, this is the joys of being pilot in command. Jabiru's here. Jabiru has fuel. Okay, don't be afraid to hold at the end because Steph and her mates are going to go, cool, track direct Hope Inlet and hold for the next 30 minutes. Been there. If people are still going around off the bottom of the ILS and you're in this situation, you're probably doing it wrong. I've been there. Okay, so with this image, not only do we have these en route alternates the whole way that we can pull into, even if it's just for half an hour to an hour, calm down, let the weather pass, then keep on going. We've got all these places here, but with all this off track, I've only added an extra 20 miles to my actual flight route, okay? So the distance was just shy of 280 miles. I'm now just shy of 300 miles. By being off route or off track, I've only added 20 miles to the actual trip. And in a 210, I've only burnt 8 litres of fuel. Okay, it's not going to break the bank. If you consider the distance, probably hasn't even gone through half of your contingency fuel. Okay, it's there for a reason. Use it. Okay, so I appreciate the guys down the back and even up the front here can't really see this because it's washed out. They should probably illustrate the image better than what it could anyway. Track to lee point and hold. I can't see your lee point. It's in there somewhere, okay? It's probably not going to work for you. So special VFR, consider that the vis is going to be really reduced down to 1,600 metres, okay? 1,600 metres off the bottom of the ILS when you break visual at 200 feet is just past the pappies, okay? So think about that. Next time you come into runway 29, get down to 200 feet, look out front, look at the pappies and go, well, geez, that's not that far in front of me, okay? So 2.5 miles a minute down at that distance, you're looking at 30 seconds before, you're effectively where you can see. Okay, 1,600 metres visibility, join final on runway 36, okay? What I want you to understand is that's the minimum visibility that you can have special VFR. So really, do you want to be there to start with? Especially when it looks like that outside in dry season, okay? That is the same image overlaid on top of each other. Perceived pressure can have a devastating impact on sound decision making, okay? I've been there. Unfortunately, I haven't got myself into too much mischief, but at the end of the day, if you feel that you're getting pressured, I'd hope it's just on the ground and not in the air, but it's going to happen in the air. Ask yourself, does it really matter? And do I need to be here? Chance is probably no. Okay, I don't really need to be here, okay? So if you don't get the job done at the end of the day, okay, the reality is this much pressure, okay, or the consequences is, you know, very small. Your perceived consequence is this big, okay. I've been there. I live it, you know, some days in my current job at the flying doctor, okay, with crook people down the back. Okay, learning to say no is a very hard skill to master, okay. It takes a lot of confidence to do it, especially the first time around. I'll tell you what, it gets easier as time goes on, as you build your experience. Okay, operational pressure. This is real world. This is only a couple of months ago down in Dubbo. I'm sorry that's not up the top end. I can't give you an actual example. Okay, Specie Dubbo, 11 o'clock at night, auto Specie. 2 knots of wind, 200 metres, fog. Okay, the important things to know, just to rehash aviation met just for 2 secs, if the temperature and the dew point have no split, okay, and you've got light winds, generally speaking, you've probably got fog. You're not likely to see it up here in Darwin itself. Out in the communities and that, you depart first thing in the morning, especially in the dry, you'll probably see it if you get there before 8 o'clock. So just keep that in mind, okay? But that's a 6 months from now problem. Okay, that's what I saw when we're loading the patient. That is real world. Okay, so what would you do if you had a sick child on the back that's a P1 patient, needs to go to Sydney in this case? What would you do? Okay, anyone want to give a crack at what the minimum viz out of Dubbo is for a qualifying aircraft? Probably 800, perfect answer. Okay, so it is below the takeoff minima. The decision has already been made for you, okay? So I loaded up the aircraft, I taxied out, I got to the runway knowing that I probably wasn't going to go to start with anyway, but you know, making an effort. It's shallow fog, it might roll through, okay? Might not. Melbourne Centre call up and go, hey, Flight Doc 299, we have a Meta Specie available, Dubbo, would you like it? Go ahead. The viz is down at now 150. So as hard as it was, I turned back around and the patient got to where they needed to go. That's not the patient, that's my son. Aircraft defects. Okay, your problem or not your problem? Okay, that's what you got to ask yourself. Okay, so it really does depend. You operate in an operation that has a minimum equipment list, so MEL. It may go down the rabbit hole of yes, no, is it legal, is it compliant with what I'm doing, is it safe to operate? Okay, so using a 310 as an example, or a 402, something with 2 alternators on board generating power. Okay, for IFR flight, we must have 2 power supplies to all the instruments in front of us. Okay, if we lose one, we may have an MEL that says, cool, you still got one, you're right to go flying, provided you're operating VFR in VMC conditions. Okay, so in the middle of the wet, is that a fair and reasonable thing to do? Maybe, maybe not. These are the things that you need to consider, okay? If you don't think it's a reasonable thing, go back to ops, go back to engineering, okay? Make it their problem, okay? Because you've done what you can do, and I appreciate, you know, it might be a hard thing to say, but if you can't operate legally, or it's not safe to fly, or you perceive that, you know, this is beyond me, that's okay. Go back to ops and go, hey, look, this is not going to work. Can I have another aeroplane? You know, or can we do something else? They probably can. Weather issues, your problem or not your problem? Again, it depends. Do you have enough fuel? Are you qualified, competent, suitably equipped to tackle the weather in front? Okay, if it's just isolated cells getting around, probably feel confident and confident that you're going to get there. Okay, provided that you take enough fuel. Okay, if you have the ability to take fuel, load more. Okay, within reason. Will the conditions, the weather, affect your ability to operate safely and legally? We're not going to go if you're going to be illegal, okay? But it may give you the option to be safe or not. I might be able to hold a alternate for Tyndall because the weather is shocking here in Darwin, but should I really be out there? Probably not. Otherwise, it's an ops problem, reschedule the flight. Simple as that. We can fly tomorrow. One thing I want to say is that, you know, the passengers that you carry, in some cases, do a lot of flying up here. Angus gave the example of his daughter, you know, has done a bit of flying. They know, generally speaking, when things are bad, okay? So if they're saying, hey, look, you know, maybe we can just go tomorrow, okay? Simple as that. there's a caveat to all this that, hey, look, if it's day VMC in Darwin or wherever you're based or wherever you're departing from, it may be suitable to get airborne, go out, okay, provided that the weather you perceive is workable, to go out and have a look. But before you commit to that, you go to the operations department, you go to your passengers and go, hey, look, I can go out and I'm going to have a look, but chances are likely we're just going to come back, okay? Or if I see that it's not going to work for us, I'm going to come back. Are you happy to proceed or not? Okay, if not, let ops can it, or the passengers can it. Don't even consider going because, what's the point? Okay, if you have to come back, come back. I put this back on our tasking all the time. Okay, if it's fogged in or the weather's poor at the destination, wherever the patients need to go, I go, okay, cool. I can go out and I can have a look, I can operate safely, I can depart safely, I can return safely. But we may not get there. Are you happy to go? Yes or no? Passenger issues. But I need to get there. I've seen this before. I've had it happen to me before. I sometimes see it in my own line of work, okay, right now. And yeah, that can be a powerful perceived pressure, okay? That's a tough one. But again, is it really your problem? Is it really your problem that you're parked up on Bathurst Island and there's a nasty squall line to the west of Darwin and old mate's got a 3:30 in the afternoon? Not really. Tell him to reschedule it. And if he still gets pushy, go, look, I'm sorry, but it's in your best interest. Is this line of weather? Show them, okay? I'm not going in this. If we wait an hour, they'll pass through. Happy days. If they still won't come to the party with that, okay, there's probably not a lot for you to do, but you're not flying out of the aeroplane. Give them the paperwork and they can go fly. Okay, so be courteous and tactful. Most will understand, okay? Pick and choose your audience. Most will understand. If they've been flying up here for a long time, they'll understand. I've got a mate that's a surveyor, just down in Humpty Doo. He goes flying all the time, and sometimes he just pulls the pin, okay? Because he knows. Career issues. Yep, been here. I got this far in my career, so I'm either doing something right or wrong. I won't get on the turbine or the twin. The boss will sack me, or worse, make me wash aeroplanes. I've been there. I need the hours for my logbook. You don't need the hours for your logbook. This is the best time in the industry. The pilots coming through, that it's the best time I've ever seen it. Okay, so this one, while I get it, shouldn't even be an issue. Okay, your perceived pressure or the consequence of not getting any of these versus the actual reality at the moment. Okay, it's an easy decision. Don't let the hours for the logbook push you into doing things that you shouldn't be doing, because is it really worth the extra hour or two for the day that you're going to get out there anyway? ATPL flight planning, okay? Even my wife got this one. Yeah, look, if anyone's watching from home, get them done before you come up with the territory. Just one less thing to do, or before you start work. It's not much fun being out in a day room, out at Jabiru, Pelly, wherever, carting around Nathan Higgins' textbooks. Yeah. In-flight issues, okay, there's a story behind this one. Your problem, very much your problem. The safety of the aircraft and its occupants are solely reliant on you, okay? Chances are it's single pilot, I guarantee, well, I'm betting that most of you here are single pilot operators, okay? So there's only one person in that cockpit, okay, and that's you. It's up to you to know where your personal limitations are. Did I get a good night's sleep last night, okay? Am I fit to go flying? Am I unwell? This is sort of the risk assessment that I'm doing when I go flying. Is it wet season and it's just beyond me? Okay, that's okay. Just put your hand up and go, hey, look, it's not working for me. Not today. Know your aircraft, okay? QRH, limits, recalls, all the stuff that you need to know. If the engine dies on you, you need to know that there's certain actions behind it, okay, to either relight it or secure it. Know your fuel state, okay? This is probably the most important one out of this slide, apart from before you go flying. When you're in flight, know what your fuel state is, okay? There's no point in disappearing into a line of cells when you've got margins and oodles of fuel for days, okay? Don't let you not knowing your fuel state push you into something that, you just don't need to do to start with, okay? When you're in flight, consider, do I need to divert, return to the point of departure, or, in doing so, try again tomorrow. There's always tomorrow, okay? You can always go out there tomorrow. You commit to something that you shouldn't be doing, there might not be a tomorrow, okay? That's the actual reality of what you guys do, okay? What you're doing up here outside of agricultural flying is probably some of the most risk inherent flying that you can do, especially when you're not that experienced, okay? You got to fill the bag of experience before the bag of luck runs out. I've been fortunate that, I've been able to fill the bag of experience. If all else fails, once you've sorted out whatever's going on, or at least establishing a pathway to it, okay, so we've secured our engine, or, we're diverting around fuel, or, diverting around weather, we've worked out what our fuel is, okay. If you are still committed to an emergency or have an emergency, declare one, okay. Talk to Stefan and mates. Talk to Brisbane Centre up here. If you can't raise them, get on the HF. Worst case, if the aeroplane, you've got it more or less sorted out and you can't contact anyone else, okay, send a quick text message. I did this for this very incident not that long ago, okay. Just to give you a bit of background on that red lever, okay, I got airborne out of Dubbo about 3 months ago, and through 500 feet, I have a quick glance down at the landing gear to make sure it's retracted, okay, before I went and did the checklist, and the handle is red, okay, and I thought, wow, this day's just got longer, okay. I had 5 hours worth of fuel, so it wasn't an emergency per se, I didn't have to do anything about it for 5 hours, okay. So all I did was I climbed up past Lower Safe to 10,000 feet, sat in a hold, got to the start of the holding pattern for the approach back into Dubbo, because I knew that, either had to go there or somewhere else, okay. Keeping in mind that it was overcast at 500 feet when I departed, but I still had 5 hours of fuel to, 1, solve the problem, but 2, go somewhere else. I could have gone to Melbourne, Hobart, wherever, I had all the fuel in the world. We came back and had a lot of paperwork to fill out right at the end of it, but it was a safe outcome. So the point I'm trying to relay to you is that fuel is everything to you guys. It determines what you do and how far you can fly the aeroplane and where you take that aeroplane. Okay, so we're getting to the nuts and bolts of the presentation here. Thunderstorms. Rates 1 star. The op review goes, service was subpar. Would not recommend. 0 stars if I could. Suggest operating in clear skies next time. Yeah. Okay, so even the big guys, do a nope every now and again, okay? So they've gone up to the line, they've decided, no, this is not for me. Effectively turned through 360 to have a look with the weather radar, and then chose a route around it. Okay. This one's in a 402 out in Arnhem Land somewhere. Okay, thunderstorms, threats, extreme turbulence, hail, okay, especially if you're operating down south. But for you turbine drivers up here, if you're cruising around in the flight levels, you'll find this. There's a couple good Google searches you can do on exactly that. Okay, lightning. So while lightning in most cases will not be an immediate threat, it's costly because composite surfaces, so like your control surfaces or other fairings and whatnot, okay, stuff that's made out of carbon fibre, fiberglass, they do not tolerate it. But more importantly, your engines, if you get a lightning strike through a prop or through the engine itself, okay, that means that it gets removed and overhauled. Especially in a turbine, it's a pretty costly exercise, okay? And you can be struck in clear air, so give these things a wide berth. Severe water ingestion, engine flame out, okay? Mainly for your turbine guys out there, okay? Risks, in-flight breakup, overstress, damage to the aircraft, okay? We can see a perfect example right here. You do not need to disappear into these things. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually gone through proper lines of stuff or found myself in these things. It isn't fun. Dash 8 a few years ago, just off here, we got a call to go to an EPIRB, okay, if someone was in distress. So we went off task in the Dash 8, we came across, we're up near Bathurst Island somewhere, okay? And we're homing to this beacon, and there's just a wall of weather in front of me, and I'm like, okay, we'll see what happens here. Yep, the weather radar, there's a clear path, but it's a valley. Okay, here we are, we're committed. And that one was on me because I'm piloting command, okay? I put us there, but okay, cool. I can see the soft spots, and we have the weather radar and the equipment to do it, okay? So we went in, and after the third line of going through this stuff, okay, we're going up and down 4,000 feet a minute. Not much fun at all, okay? It was like flying through an ocean, okay? So if I didn't want to be there, you guys don't need to be there. We broke visual, and there's just more black in front of us, okay? We're now about 5 to 10 miles to run the actual beacon itself, okay? The guys are like, yep, it's immediately ahead. We got 5 to 10 miles to run. I go, it is still black out in front of us. We're in clear air. I can't take you any further, okay? So we entered a holding pattern. An hour later, we burn off the rest of the fuel that we had, and the observers come out to us just after they landed, after they went into the office to check how things were going with OzSAR, and they said, guys, we really didn't need to be there. It was a boat that had an electrical failure. So be careful what perceived pressure can push you into, okay? Because this is nasty, nasty, nasty stuff. Injury or death goes without saying. Most of this stuff I covered earlier on. Start thinking of your margin and, you know, in some cases, your contingency fuel in flight. Start thinking of that fuel in terms of distance, okay? I gave the example that, you know, you're burning 60 litres an hour, travelling at 2.5 miles a minute, okay? So if you've got 20 litres on board, that gives me 50 miles off track that I can be right from the get-go. And that's if I just go up to a wall of thunderstorms and then turn to 90 degrees before I even consider coming back and going off in the same direction I was originally travelling. If I've got 10 litres of contingency fuel, okay, if you have to, use it. 25 miles, so now I've got 75 miles that I can use in flight to go somewhere, okay? 75 miles. I haven't even considered turning around or diverting en route into this case in the Jabiru, okay? So use your fuel, it's there. Get used to being off track, okay? In the wet season, you're gonna be off track, okay? This is the bottom of the flight plan for 210 I did, you know, I jugged it up to full fuel, 336 litres. It's given me a margin of 38 litres, okay? That's just margin, that's not even contingency fuel. 95 miles, so call it 100 miles. That's how far off track I can be before I start burning my contingency fuel. So use it. If you've got the ability to gas right up, especially in the single, do it. Again, real world example, Star of the Year. Appreciate it's in Western New South Wales, but it illustrates the point perfectly. I took off out of Bourke mid-late afternoon, got airborne. I could see this stuff developing. There was a line that went right into Queensland all the way down to Bass Strait, and it's absolutely nasty, okay? You can see that I've gotten halfway, and then some wag out in Broken Hill's gone, don't you break that new aircraft, Braden? I'm like, yeah, thanks, Neil. I turned around, I went back to Bourke, and I haven't nodded because I chickened out. I've shown the photos to both Simon and Sam of upturned aeroplanes in Dubbo because none of them were tied down. Same for Orange. This stuff was nasty, nasty, nasty stuff, and there's no path around it. Extended for 300-400 miles. Okay, so don't ever be scared to turn back around. Golden rule of thumb here, you can't fly through them. You really shouldn't fly under them, trust me. Divert upwind where possible. That's mainly, again, just my advice, more towards down south for the lower levels that we operate because we're trying to mitigate hail, but I'd recommend that at any time you need to divert around them, you know, upwind. If you're up in the flight levels in the turbine, always upwind, okay? Because there's going to be hail falling out of the thunderhead. Go back to CPL Met, private Met, have a bit of a read. FAA recommends 20 nautical mile standoff, okay? This is going to be dependent on your comfortability, where you're operating, okay? Down south, you sometimes can't even get within 20 miles of them before they're hitting you in clear air. You know, some of these are really, really nasty. Slow the aircraft right down, okay? Bring it back to maneuvering speed or rough airspeed if it has one. Something to keep in mind, okay? That maneuvering airspeed is not rough air airspeed. Your 210s, 402s, 310s, most of the GA lighties are not designed to go through thunderstorms. Okay, you shouldn't be there. King Air gives you 170 knots as rough airspeed. Okay, the manoeuvring speed is 181. The point I'm trying to give you is that, yeah, they've considered, cool, you might end up in this situation, but it's not recommended. Even the pilot operating handbook says that for King Air. Okay, so don't even think about it, even with the weather radar. Okay, I recommend that you go do some reading on thunderstorm avoidance. The FAA publishes some really good advice. It's old, but it talks about not chasing an airspeed, slowing the aircraft down to a suitable airspeed. Okay, don't maintain an altitude unless you're low. The point being is that just let the waves carry you. Okay, because otherwise you'll overstress the aircraft. Okay, and just the guidance recommends keeping on a straight line. I don't know if that's going to be appropriate for your situation, okay? But point is, there's a path around them, generally speaking. If not, turn around or divert. One final word on all of this, and I was talking to one of the guys I used to fly with just recently, just in the last week, saying, what do I put in these slides? And his advice was, your passengers, friends, and family do not choose the rules that you break, nor the weather you fly in. Okay, so consider that next time you go do something dodgy or you're not quite sure of what I should do here. If you get yourself in that situation, phone a friend. Phone your head of flying ops. That's what they get paid the big bucks to do. They can't make a decision for you, but they can give you guidance. There's only one person on board that aircraft, generally speaking, that can make the decision. And that's you. Okay, you can't delegate decision making. The best piece of advice I was ever given was from a helicopter pilot of all people. I'm not dying to get there.
Just to finish off, I'm going to ask you now perhaps to make a commitment. I'm going to make a commitment before we embark on this wet season for a number of different things. Will you make a commitment to be honest about your knowledge, your ability, and your experience? Will you make a commitment to be humble, to seek advice, to ask questions, to have the conversations? Will you make a commitment to actually work proactively to try and fill those knowledge gaps and not be that 51% pilot, but to go for knowledge in depth, to find out as much as you possibly can? After walking out of here this evening, will you make a commitment to use all the resources at your disposal to help you make better operational decisions and manage risk more appropriately? And for those of us in the room that may have had a number of wet seasons under our belt, will you make a commitment to mentor those around you that are perhaps less experienced? Because even for the senior people, there was a time when you arrived up here and embarked on your very first wet season as well. Knowledge gained should be knowledge shared. So will you make that commitment? And finally, will you, as Braden alluded to, will you stop and listen to that little tiny small voice in the back of your head that says stop and reassess? Stop and reassess. So as part of this, the resources we have on our website in CASA are quite extensive. Our Pilot Safety Hub has access to all sorts of things, webinars where we talk to people throughout industry on a whole variety of topics. Webinars, podcasts, videos, all these types of things are free of charge. 24 hours a day, you can access them, you can educate. Don't just wait for us to come up to Darwin and run fantastic events like this. This is fantastic. But as an organisation, will you actually take up the torch and do your own internal training? Because at the end of the day, you own your own risks. We have the Aviation Safety Pledge, and I'll put up another QR code at the end. Will you join those organisations, those maintenance professionals, those pilots around the country, from the top of industry all the way to the general aviation and even the sport aviation sector, that have actually put a stake in the ground and said, I will make a commitment, I will make a public pledge that I value safety, and all of those things that we saw in that earlier slide. Many organisations have taken up that pledge, and will you join them? I'd like to personally thank our agency partners and our guest speakers that have travelled far and wide to be here tonight to share their expertise with us. Will you put your hands together for our speakers, please?